Okay, so welcome everybody to this topic of course methods of research. This time, our first topic is an introduction on research methodology. Let's begin by showing you the topic outlines. These are what is the meaning of research? What are the objectives? Why we do research? The motivations behind doing research? And of course, the different types of research. And last will be the different research approaches. Research in common parlance refers to a search for knowledge. One can also define research as a scientific and systematic search for pertinent information on a specific topic. And in fact, it is an art of scientific investigation. So notice here that we use the term science. It is a scientific and systematic search. It is an art of scientific investigation. But what is science? Basically, science is systematic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe. It may also refer to the body of knowledge, organized and systematic. But more than that, I want to say that science is more than just a body of knowledge. It is, to some extent, and it is, for me, the essence. I want to quote Carl Sagan. To him, science is a way of thinking, much more than it is a body of knowledge. There's just no other way. It is the way to go. Another one from Edwin Powell Hava. I'd like to paraphrase his quote about the meaning of science. To him, man, using his five senses, although actually we have more than five senses, man, using his senses, explores the universe around him and calls that adventure science. So science is a way of thinking. It is also a kind of adventure. Some people consider research as a movement from something which is unknown to something which is known. It is a voyage for discovery. Don't you ever feel that you kind of possess a vital instinct of curiosity or inquisitiveness in you, that when you are faced with something which is unknown, you kind of wander out of your curiosity or inquisitiveness, which drives you or makes you seek primarily for the basic understanding of that which something bugs you. This curiosity or inquisitiveness is the mother of all knowledge, and the method which we use to obtain that knowledge can be termed as research. Research is also an academic activity. Academic means something related or associated to an academy or school, especially of higher learning, or based on formal study, especially in an institution of higher learning. Let's add more rigorous meaning. According to Clifford Woody, research comprises of defining and redefining problems, formulating hypotheses or suggested solutions, collecting, organizing, and evaluating data, making deductions and reaching conclusions, and at last carefully testing those conclusions to determine whether they fit with the formulating hypothesis. Another definition from Schlesinger and Stephenson in social sciences. Research is the manipulation of things, concepts, or symbols for the purpose of generalizing to extend, correct, or verify knowledge, whether that knowledge aids in deconstruction of a theory or in the practice of an art. So these are the different meanings of research, but the core of its definition is it adds something new to the body of knowledge. So to formally define research is a careful, well-defined, or redefined objective and systematic method of search for knowledge or formulation of a theory that is driven by inquisitiveness or curiosity for something which is unknown and useful on a particular aspect to make an original contribution to expand the existing knowledge base. I want to give emphasis on the original contribution to expand the existing knowledge base. It is the heart of why we do research. We want to uncover that which is unknown, and as a result, we discover something new. We add new knowledge. We fill the gap. That's the tenet or central idea of research, to add something new. So, what are the objectives of research? What are the objectives why we do research? What is the reason why we do research? The purpose of research is to discover answers to questions through the application of the scientific method. And the main aim of research is to find out the truth, which is kind of hidden and which has not yet been discovered. Though each research type or each research study has its own specific purpose, we may think of research objectives as one of these categories. One is to gain familiarity with a phenomenon or to achieve new insights into it. It may be referred to as exploratory or formulative research studies. Another possible objective, to portray accurately the characteristics of a particular individual, situation, group, or even phenomenon, or anything that can be described. And that type of research is known descriptive research. It is one of the basic and most easy type of research. I want to give you an example. This is actually the result of students survey. This is a survey of students about their allowances and frequency of visiting the library in our school. Let's try to open this one. Here is our first example of descriptive research. The question is, how many times do you go to the library in a week? Second question, how many books do you borrow from the library in a week? What types of books do you usually borrow? Does the library provide various books based on your borrowed experiences? Do you think your borrowed books help you understand more of the subjects you take? In which ways you can best understand the concepts in a certain subject? Which of these do you think the library needs change or improvement? What about a paperless transaction for borrowing books? This survey is a requirement of their subject statistics last 2 years ago. Okay, let's try another example. How much is your weekly allowance? Weekly allowance survey of TUPV students. So the average weekly allowance is around 850 maybe. How much of your allowance do you spend in transportation in a day? How often do you take meals at school or nearby in a week? So in lunch, usually they spend lunch at home. I don't know. The question is, how often do you take meals at school? Correct. At school. The place is school. So at lunch, they usually eat less often. Dinner, of course, they do it in their boarding house, in their houses. How much do you usually spend on a single meal? Around 49 pesos? Wow, so thrifty. Okay, this is interesting. In a typical week, how much of your allowance go on the following? You have the symbol down here. Green for none, 0 to 25, 25 to 50. So let's see. Subscribing to plan, that's none. Wow, good student. 0 to 25 for photocopies. 50 to 100 is color. 50 to 100 for load, call. Next is project material. How much of your allowance go to your savings in a week? Okay, none. 1 to 75, 75 to 150. That's good enough. And now, okay, so let's go back to our lecture. Those surveys are basically describing the questions. They are describing the status of the students. Where do their allowances go? Or how often do they visit the library? The purpose of that is only to portray as much as possible accurately, to describe or to depict or display the characteristics of a particular individual, group, or situation. Another possible objective is to determine the frequency with which something occurs or with which it is associated with something else, as in diagnostic research studies. And of course, the last, to test a hypothesis of a causal relationship in variables, hypothesis testing research studies. Okay, so let's go to the next. The motivation of research. Why do we do research? Okay. What makes people undertake research? This is a question that is important to know. The possible motives for doing research may be one or more of the following. Again, this list is not exhaustive. It may be more than what I can show you. One is desire to get a research degree along with its consequential benefits. Desire to face the challenge in solving the unsolved problems. Concern over practical problems initiates research. Desire to get intellectual joy doing some creative work. Desire to be of service to society. That is a very noble desire. Dutiful. Desire to get respectability. Okay, if that's what you want. So that's all for the motivation of research. You may find other motivation, but I just happen to give you 5 examples. Okay, so let's discuss now the different types of research. Descriptive versus analytical or explanatory. Descriptive research includes surveys and finding inquiries of different kinds. The major purpose of descriptive research is the present description of the state. Ex post facto research in social science and businesses is used for descriptive research studies. It's just the same, but they're using different terms. The main point of this method is that the researcher has no control over the variables. He can only report what has happened or what is happening. The previous examples I showed you are examples of descriptive research. They did not intervene. They just record what they have observed and they report it. The researcher holds no control over the variables. Rather, they only report. On the contrary, in analytical research, the researcher has to use facts or information that are already available and makes analysis and critical evaluation of the material. For example, in chemical properties, in chemistry, there are many different chemical properties, such as valence electron, what we call this one? The number of atomic number, the number of protons, number of neutrons. We have also the boiling point, the freezing point, the conductivity, the resistivity. These informations are already available. And what if you want to see the pattern? What if there is an association between valence electron numbers and conductivity, right? What if an atom which has more valence electron has higher conductivity? So that is your question, that is your hypothesis. You may want to prove that by using those already available information. That is an example of analytical research. Some researchers conduct analytical research to find supporting evidence to current research that is being done in order to make the work more reliable and credible. In other words, they want to increase the confidence of the claim. Other researchers conduct analytical research to form new ideas about the topic being studied. Analytical research is conducted in a variety of ways. So that's analytical or explanatory research. The keywords there is the use or the utilization of existing facts or information. Actually, it can be used in a variety of ways, including scientific trials, public opinion, literary research, and even meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is a statistical analysis that combines the results of multiple scientific studies. So, multiple scientific studies, those are facts and information that are already available. So, analytical research, in conclusion, is a very wide approach to research, while descriptive is fundamentally describing the state of affair or the state of matter, while analytical research is trying to connect those dots. But some research studies can be both descriptive and analytical. Applied versus fundamental. Research can either be applied or action, or fundamental or basic or pure research. Applied research aims at finding a solution for an immediate problem which faces a society or even a group of individuals, such as industry or business organization. Whereas fundamental research or basic research or pure research is mainly concerned with the generalizations and with the formulation of a theory. It's not concerned of any practical solution. Gathering knowledge for knowledge's sake is termed pure or basic research. Research concerning some natural phenomenon or relating to pure mathematics are examples of fundamental research. Similarly, research studies concerning human behavior carried on with a view to make generalizations about how human behaves are also examples of fundamental research. I mean, how do we really behave, or what are the real motivations of all our decisions? The central aim of applied research is to discover a solution for some pressing practical problem, whereas basic research is directed towards finding information that has a broad application. Examples. Does marriage prevent certain mental or physical illnesses? How can bullying be prevented in elementary schools? What changes are necessary to create jobs in rural areas? Is modern technology creating a dumbing down of individuals? Are there ways to prevent juvenile offenders from becoming lifelong criminals? What are the ways to market products to millennials? And last but not least, how does immigration affect the economy? All these questions can be answered through applied research, because these questions demand immediate resolution. Applied research is designed to solve practical problems of the modern world, rather than to acquire knowledge for knowledge's sake. You might say that the goal of the applied scientist is to improve the human condition, correct? These are pressing questions that need to have immediate solutions. It needs to have answers now. It is urgent. It's called applied for a reason, because we need to apply what we already knew to find a solution to these matters. Okay, so fundamental. How did the universe begin? What are protons, neutrons, and electrons composed of? How do slime molds reproduce? What is the specific genetic code of the fruit fly? These questions are very profound. They demand a very fundamental rethinking of what we think we know. Another question, how does life evolve from biochemical reactions? Oh my god, that's wrong. Where do DNA get their instruction? Actually, the last two questions are mine. I just made it up because I just want to include it. Another types of research can be quantitative or quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative research is based on, you guess it, the measurement of quantity or amount, while qualitative research is concerned with quality, with phenomena relating to or involving quality or kind. For example, when we are interested in investigating the reasons for human behavior, why do people think or do certain things? Motivation research can answer these questions, which is important type of qualitative research. Qualitative research is especially important in the behavioral sciences, where the aim is to discover the underlying motives of human behavior. Through such research, we can analyze the various factors which motivate people to behave in a particular manner, or which make people like or dislike a particular thing, as in the case of attitude or opinion research, which is used to find out how people feel or what they think about a particular subject or institution or even issue. It may be thought that quantitative research deals with quantitative data and qualitative research deals with qualitative data, but that's not quite the case. In some types of quantitative research, they use quantitative analysis to some extent. I like qualitative research too. There are beautiful discoveries brought by qualitative research. Another types of research, conceptual or theoretical versus empirical or experimental. Conceptual research is that related to some abstract ideas or theory. It is generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to reinterpret existing ones. On the other hand, empirical research relies on experience. Empiricists, those people who rely on experiences or observation alone, often without due regard for system and theory. Empirical research is appropriate when proof is sought that certain variables affect other variables in some way, kind of like analytical or explanatory. Empirical research is data-based research. We can also call it an experimental type of research. In such a research, it is necessary to get at facts firsthand, at their source, and the researcher must first provide himself with a working hypothesis or guess for a particular problem. Then, he works to get enough facts or data to prove or disprove his hypothesis. He then sets up experimental designs which he thinks will manipulate the persons or the materials concerned so as to bring forth the desired information. Such research is therefore characterized by the experimenter's control over the variables under study and his deliberate manipulation of one of them to study its effects. Empirical research is suitable when we want to establish connection between variables. Evidence gathered through experiments or empirical studies is considered to be the most powerful support possible for a given hypothesis. I think in engineering field, one of the most common research designs is of experimental type. We will discuss different experimental designs in the next video. You may confuse experimental or empirical research with exploratory or formulative in that they both use information or data, but in exploratory, the data are already available. All you have to do is to collect or gather them, while in experimental or empirical, the data is yet to be produced. That is, in exploratory, they use secondary data, while in experimental, they use primary data. Another main distinction between the two is that in experimental, you begin with a hypothesis, while in exploratory, you end with a working hypothesis. Okay, so those are the most popular types of research, but there are also less known types of research. All other types of research are variations of one or more of the previous types of research based on either the purpose of research or the time required to accomplish research, on the environment in which the research is done, or on the basis of some other similar factor. From the point of view of time, we can think of research either as one-time research or longitudinal research. In one-time research, the research is confined to a single time period. It's done and it's finished. Whereas in longitudinal research, the research is carried on over several time periods, meaning it is continued. And speaking of longitudinal study, the Harvard study of adult development, for 75 years, It may be the longest study of adult life. The goal of the study was to identify predictors of healthy aging. And you want to know the answers? I provided a link below. Research can be field setting, laboratory, or simulation, depending upon the environment in which it is to be carried out. Exploratory research or formulative research. In exploratory research, as the name implies, intends merely to explore the research question. The objective of exploratory research is the development of hypotheses rather than their testing, whereas formalized or formal research studies are those with substantial structure and with specific hypotheses to be tested. So those are the keywords. Exploratory or formulative, they are concerned about the development of hypotheses, whereas formal, hypothesis with testing. When a research aims to gain familiarity with a phenomenon or to acquire new insight in order to formulate a more precise problem or to develop a hypothesis, exploratory study should be employed. If the theory happens to be too general or too specific, where a hypothesis cannot be formulated easily, a need for an exploratory research may be realized and instituted to gain experience that may help in formulating relevant hypotheses for definite investigation. Exploratory research has the objective of clarifying the exact nature of the problem to be solved, which helps him define the problems and suggest the hypothesis. Formal research is a style of research in which data is gathered in a very controlled, structured, systematic, and objective way. Formal research is designed to have a very strict format, and it is the way in which students and academics prepare papers and studies to be peer-reviewed, critiqued, and possibly published in a scholarly or scientific journal. Formal research follows the protocol and methodology of the discipline. It involves learning what other researchers have already done in that area, reviewing the key ideas already known, then adding new information based on original work done by previous researchers. It is usually done in an academic or professional setting, say a physics institute or university school of medicine. Those are formal researches. And of course, if we have formal research, we also have an informal research. Informal research is less organized and systematic. The researcher may or may not have anything in the field, and the level of expertise can vary invariably. The researcher approaches the work as an interested party looking for information that will be useful in some way. The researcher may or may not have anything new or original to add to the topic. This is strange because the researcher may or may not have anything new and original to add to the topic, because as we previously discussed, the tenet of research is something new. The investigation into a subject may be only for personal knowledge, or perhaps to use in an publication that is less scholarly in nature, such as a novel or short story, rather than a scientific journal. Or the informal research will be for personal growth and interest only, with no publication resulting from it. Sources should still be cited, but the style in which citations are written is a matter of personal choice. Informal research is done by individuals like authors, inventors, who are studying the backgrounds of the respective areas. In other words, they don't follow a certain protocol, or they don't belong to a prestigious group. Primary research versus secondary research. Primary research is research that is collected firsthand and original to the person using it. When conducting primary research, the goal is to answer questions that have not been asked before. It can be a survey, observation, or an interview. This type of research tends to be more time-consuming and can be very, very costly. If possible, secondary research should be done first before primary research, because it gives you an advantage to determine what information is not already available or what information is lacking. Secondary research involves the summary, collation, and synthesis of existing research. Secondary research is different from primary research in that primary research involves the generation of data, whereas secondary research uses primary research sources as a source of data for analysis. For example, by simply searching for a particular topic using Google search engine and making a summary of what you've found, that can be considered as secondary research. It's basically educating yourself with information that other people have worked for. It is a common practice by researchers to conduct secondary research before primary research. Common examples of secondary research include textbooks, encyclopedias, news articles, review articles, Secondary research is based on already published data and information gathered from other conducted studies. Secondary research is an easy place to start when starting a new research project. It can vary in credibility, though, depending on where the data is coming from and who is sharing the research. But it's important to bear in mind, making your own summary based on secondary sources can create biases and misinterpretations, which can have an negative impact on your research project. So those are the differences between the two. And a notable distinction of primary research from secondary research is the inclusion of a methods section, where the authors describe how the data was generated. We will get to it more in our future topics. So these are the other types of research, and secondary research is important because it's reviewing existing body of knowledge. There's a name for you. Personally, I have experienced this one, so it's important to remember that the very first thing to do for any researcher or students who want to study something is to explore. Explore everything that can be explored, because it allows for a better understanding in what the research team's objective should be throughout the duration of a project. So in this picture, a student gets attracted to the new paper because it is more interesting than the paper that was reviewed, the paper that you have read and made a complete proposal from. This is the dilemma of undergrad students because the amount of secondary research is not enough. In our future topic, the literature review is very, very important. So these are the common types of research. There are many more types of research which are not appropriate or suitable under the area of engineering field, such as clinical research, diagnostic research, market research, and many more. Now let's go to research approaches. We have two research approaches, the quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. In quantitative approach, it involves the generation of data in, of course, quantitative form, which can be subjected to rigorous quantitative analysis. This approach can be further subclassified into inferential, experimental, and simulation approaches to research. The purpose of inferential approach to research is to make a database from which to infer or to conclude characteristics or relationships of population, while experimental approach is characterized by a much greater control over the research environment, and in this case, some variables are manipulated to observe their effect on other variables, while simulation is an imitation of a real thing. Simulation approach involves the construction of an artificial environment within which relevant information and data can be generated. This permits an observation of the dynamic behavior of a system or its subsystem under controlled conditions. Simulation approach can be very useful in building models for understanding future conditions. There are lots of examples, especially in dynamic systems, such as we want to predict and determine the behavior of the spread of a certain virus in stress analysis and dynamic loadings of biomaterials and of modern materials under different loading conditions. We can see the different stresses at different locations of the materials. In behavior research, one may be interested to find that it's important to know how a pilot reacts in dangerous flying conditions. Obviously, it's clearly not ideal to make this happen in real life, so we have to employ simulation research. It has a lot of advantages, and of course, the most attractive thing to me is that it gives us something that we can never see in real life setting. It gives us the power to see, which cannot be seen by normal vision. Next is the qualitative approach. Qualitative approach to research is concerned with subjective assessment of attitudes, opinions, and behavior. Research in such a situation is a function of researchers' insights and impressions. Such approach to research generates results either in non-quantitative form or in the form which are not subjective to rigorous quantitative analysis. As I mentioned earlier, qualitative researchers are also amazing. What are the examples of qualitative approaches? What is ethnography? Ethnography is the strategy of inquiry in which a researcher studies an intact cultural group in a natural setting over a prolonged period of time. Grounded theory. Grounded theory is a strategy of inquiry in which the researcher derives a general abstract theory of a process, action, or interaction grounded in the views of the participant. Case studies. Case studies are strategy of inquiry in which the researcher explores an in-depth program, event, activity, process, or one or more individuals. Phenomenological research. Phenomenological research is a strategy of inquiry in which the researcher identifies the essence of human experiences about phenomenon as described by participants. Narrative research is a strategy of inquiry in which the researcher studies the lives of individuals and asks one or more individuals to provide stories about their lives. I like qualitative research. They are beautiful. They reveal something in us that is profoundly embedded in our psyche. So that's it for now. That's it for the moment. I want to end this discussion by saying that most of the books that you can see, most of the knowledge that can be learned is because of those people who patiently and even painfully and joyfully do research. Most of what we know is the product of research, a systematic acquisition of truth. If science is a way of thinking, research is a way of life. Okay, so if you have questions, suggestions, or recommendations about the topics that we've discussed, or even for the future topics that you want to be covered in the future videos, please don't hesitate to post on the comment section below, and we'll try to address them in the next topics. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening.